Since Slam and Roll will be the third indie title that I'll cover, and I have one more lined up already waiting for its turn, I feel it's best that I settle on some kind of a constant methodology so that these previews are less chaotic, easier to watch and understand. I will base them around 5 points. First, covering what the game is about. Second, we'll tackle the presentation, so sounds, music and graphics, not necessarily in that order. Third, we'll list all the good things about it. Fourth, all bad, cause there's gotta be a balance in the force. And finally, fifth, will be a conclusion. Naturally, same as always, despite getting a game code from the developer, it did not influence my opinion about the game and no one pre-screened what I will tell you today. So, with all that out of the way, let's jump straight in. If you played Bubble Bobble or Rodland in the arcades in the 80s and / or 90s, you'll feel in Slam and Roll right at home. It's a callback to the most addictive and fun single-screen platformers of the time, both in the way it looks and in the way it plays. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The world has been attacked. Yes, you heard that right, and aliens are roaming it, targeting our most famous monuments, bent on their destruction. Why monuments in particular? Hard to tell, perhaps same as the saying goes that the way to the man's heart is through his stomach, the way to the fall of humanity is through the architecture. Best not to look for the reason though, there may be none really, game logic, but focus on finding a solution. So, since the conventional weapons seem to be totally ineffective against the alien invasion, a local sports club armed with magically enhanced weapons is the only means we have to deal with the Scourge. And our best weapon is our top player. No other than the world-famous hero extraordinaire, you. If I was to simplify Slam and Roll to its most basic, I'd say that it's the aforementioned Bubble Bobble but modernized and expanded upon for the new era. So, it's predominantly a single-screen platformer. The stages, however, are usually much more intricately designed than those of the classic, filled to the brim with enemies and not symmetrical, which was often the case before. All you really have to do in most levels is dispose of all the aliens. Simple as that. And you do it by first stunning and then magically entrapping them in the balls spawned by your weapon. If you walk into a ball-locked enemy, your character jumps inside, so to speak, and the ball then launches, rolling all over the stage and killing anything it comes in contact with. Alternatively, instead of walking into it, you can hit it with your weapon, which will launch it into the roll without trapping you in two. So, if you can do both, why would you ever quote-unquote enter the ball? Well, when you're in, you're temporarily invulnerable, so it can be used as means of escape from an overwhelming group of enemies. And since we're on the subject, there seems to be dozens of entirely different aliens in the game, each with their own unique looks and behavioral patterns. Big, small, fast, slow, tons of them. Some will just walk around trying to touch you, and naturally, as in most arcade games, if they do, you die. Others have different forms of attacks, shooting, fire spitting or jumping at you from afar, to name a few. Variety actually seems to be an overarching theme in Slam and Roll. The characters you can play as, even though there's only 2 to pick between when first played, will quickly expand with additional ones, unlocking as you go through the game. They're all members of the sports club, each representing a different sport that they mastered and using weapons fitting their chosen disciplines. So there's baseball, hockey, soccer, tennis and more. They look and differ in stats a little, but generally speaking, play near identically, meaning you won't have to relearn the game when going for the new one. Slam and Roll is composed out of 8 worlds comprising of over 200 stages. Yes, you did not mishear, I did not misspoke, there's over 200 of them. Most are single screen, but there are also sort of Floris lava stages where you don't have to defeat all the enemies but get to the top as quickly as possible, avoiding falling down to your demise. These scroll vertically and are rather nice change of pace, feeling like welcome refreshes between the regular ones. And finally bosses, majority of which, well, at least those that I saw so far, take a big chunk of the screen and require defeating most of the time using stunned enemies and trapped in balls as the, let's call it, ammunition for it. I've not completed the game yet and only saw 6 or 7 of these bosses so far, but each and every one I experienced required a different mechanic, finding and utilizing different way of defeating them. And I gotta tell you that after the first few, I was looking forward to each and every boss, as they are really fun to challenge. Other than that, there are also bonus stages and these are different and unique too. All that said, the most important thing about Slam and Roll is that it's fun. And it is, especially that it can be enjoyed in a simultaneous 2-player mode with a friend. Sadly, I didn't get a chance to test it out as I have no one here with me, but it's definitely a cherry on this already sweet pie of a game. Presentation. So sounds, music and graphics. Well, I'm no musician, nor am I an avid listener of music, so it's hard for me to come from a position of a critic, but while I didn't mind the music at all, at least for as much as I played Slam and Roll so far, I've never found myself humming any of the tunes I've heard, so it's safe to say that it's not as catchy as that in Bubble Bobble or Rodland. It's a very objective thing though, and you may find yourself feeling different about it. Sounds are okay, meaty where they're supposed to be, more subtle where they don't need to be too loud, and overall sounding as if they were torn out of the real-life arcade cabinet. And same can be said about the graphics. They're a pixel heaven and something that would not feel out of place in the arcades in the mid-90s. They may not be the pinnacle of 2D, but they're definitely very detailed, varied and colorful, and most of all, super smoothly animated. Sure, some platforms look a bit out of place, I can't explain why, but some do. It may be the choice of colors or how they look on particular backgrounds, but generally speaking, there's really nothing to complain about here. So, let's talk about pros and cons, or good and bad if you will. First of all, the overarching theme here seems to be the variety. Be it characters you play as, enemies, stages, bosses, you name it. There's a lot of everything in Slam and Roll and it's never feeling stale or repeatable, even if the characters feel more like skins rather than entirely differently feeling choices. Then there's the presentation, which like I've mentioned before may not be the best I've seen or heard, but it's really good nonetheless, and arcade-like in its design, and spark that feeling of nostalgia you never knew you could have for a game you've never played before. Gameplay mechanics are ace in Slam and Roll. I mean, it's one of those games that are incredibly easy to pick up and play, but will take a while to master. Especially if you want to get 3 stars in all stages, which more often than not will require fulfilling certain objectives, for instance performing set number of slams. Also, boss levels mechanics, where each of them feels, plays and acts differently, is a really unique and engaging experience. Games live or die by their controls. And I'm happy to report that these are as tight here as you could have hoped they would be. They're arcade good. And I know that this may seem like gibberish, but if you've played games in the arcades in the 80s or 90s, you know exactly what I mean by that. All that, however, is dwarfed by how much fun the game is. Slam and Roll is fantastic. I thought that 15-20 minutes would be enough for me to check it out and form some kind of an opinion that would be preview worthy. You know, to feel the game out, sample all kinds of levels it has to offer and then report back on it, not calling it a review, as that would call for a full playthrough. But I was so wrong. I played for around an hour and never noticed when the time flew by. It was fast, it was frantic, but in the same time, at least after a few initial levels, required me to think and plan out level completion strategies, keeping in mind the layouts and kinds of enemies present. It's great. While I was not a huge fan of the music, it didn't feel out of place and wasn't bad objectively speaking. Also, the characters, there's a lot of them, sure, and they differ in stats, sure, but realistically, they don't feel distinctive enough for me to feel any of them are better or worse than the others, and I treat them as skins only. All of these are no real issues, however, just observations on my end, and I really can't think of anything that I would find to be bad, broken or not working in Slam and Roll. Slam and Roll is a complete and well thought out package. It's clear from the get-go, from the very first moment that you run it, that it's not a product of chance and that a lot of planning, design, balancing and work went into it. It's a love letter to the 90s arcades and it's as polished as hardly any other indie game is upon its release. I'm definitely going to be finishing the game as soon as I have more free time on my hands and gonna try to check it out in multiplayer too, as while I didn't have a chance to sample it yet, it looks hella fun on the videos I've seen. Videos, as fun as they may be though, don't tell a full story. This one's no exception, and Slam and Roll is actually way more fun than it appears to be on the footage. There is no better way of knowing than trying it out yourself though. And while the game is not out yet and will be very soon, the demo is available on Steam today, and I can pretty much guarantee that if you give it a chance, you'll wishlist the game after doing so and will eagerly await the release. Especially if you have someone else to play it with. I'd like to thank Jamie from Kaleido Games, which I hope I'm not mispronouncing here, for giving me a chance to check Slam and Roll out. I was hoping that it would be fun, and it not only did not fail, but also over-delivered. So, thank you, Jamie. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.